Yes, it's John G. Sutton here. Tales from the jail. I want to talk a little today, a little bit about the problems that I experienced at Strangeways when I became what you might say has been notorious. Because I'd formed a trade union called the Prison Force Federation. I got it registered with the certification office. It was in direct competition with the Prison Officers Association, and because the Prison Officers Association was effectively run by management, they set out to undermine all my credibility and started putting stories about how I was an agent of the leader of Libya, Colonel Gaddafi, and he was paying me to cause disruption and chaos in the British prison system, which was absolute utter nonsense, you know. And listen, my brother he was a detective inspector at the time in the Greater Manchester Criminal Investigation Department, and his colleague was a guy called Ed Beeman, who was a chief inspector, and he was attached to MI5. And I was with my brother, and Ed Beeman happened to be there one day, and he said to me, he said, "I have something to tell you, John." He said, "You do know that we're watching you, don't you?" I said, "Who's we, you know?" He said, "MI5. He said, "Believe it or not," he said, "you've got a file at MI5. He said, "They consider you to be a threat to the security of the country." Yeah, me. That definitely wasn't. All I didn't want was to be pissed around by the POA, yeah, and forced to work in compulsory overtime. It was 1979, 1980, 1979, that time, yeah? Compulsory overtime. And when we're talking compulsory overtime, you worked every other weekend. So when it came to the first weekend you worked, the second weekend, it was your weekend off. So you'd think that having that weekend off and spending it with your family and your children and all that, that would be reasonable, you know? No. The POA had agreed with the governor that they were going to have compulsory overtime. So I said, "You have your compulsory overtime. I ain't doing it." And they set about to cause some problems for me. People tried to set me up, you know, on charges, disciplinary charges. One disciplinary charge I was placed on, seriously, these are fictitious charges were made up. I was working in the I think it was the weaving sheds, you know, on as a discipline officer in there, and there were two of us in there, two officers, and I had got I think I got 6 years seniority at that time, and in the weaving shed with me as the other officer was a man who I will not name, but you readily will identify him. Big fat ignorant pig. Wore his hat on the back of his head, and you can see him in that Strangeways documentary, series 3, called no, the third in the thing called Screws. He has his back on the hat on the back of his head, and he's waffling like he's a big head. Well, he was a big head, a big fat pig. Yeah, he was in there with me, and I was sat down at the main entrance to the unit where they were doing all the weaving sheds. So I was in charge of that. And the way it works in the prison service, it works on seniority. Are you with me? If whoever's got more service in is the senior officer in that any particular setting. If you've passed the promotion exam, then you are exceeding anybody else who hasn't passed the promotion exam. So not only had I got 6 years service in, but I had passed the promotion exam. That's the principal officer's exam. You know, I'd passed all that. And the big fat ignorant pig who was in there with me, he hadn't passed anything. In fact, he'd only been a prison officer for approximately 2 years. And he came down and sat next to me. And I said, you know, Fatso, well, I didn't call him Fatso, I called him by his name, but let's call him Fatso. Yeah, so I said, you should be at the other end of this wing, of this unit, so that you're in charge of that end and I'm in charge of this end. No, he said, I am the senior officer. And no sooner was he saying that than in to the unit came a principal officer called Malcolm de Kock. Yeah, he was a South African origin, and his name was Malcolm de Kock. And he came in and he said to me, Mr. Sutton, why are you not at the far end of the, you're neglecting your duty? I said, I'm not neglecting my duty, I'm doing my duty. I said, it's Fatso here that should be at the other end. Oh no, he said, this man's got 13 years service in. I said, he's got 13 years service in? Yes. As a assistant, you know, he wasn't a prison officer. He'd only got 2 years as a prison officer in. He'd been an auxiliary officer for about 10, 12 years, but he'd only got 2 years in as an actual officer. No, he said, I decide who's got the senior officer, and you, he said, anyway, I'm charging you with this. I said, all right, please proceed, you know. Which he did, and I was hauled up before the governor on a charge of neglecting my duty, and I absolutely proved to the governor that I was the senior officer. I got my certificate of passing the promotion exam. I got the date that I was commissioned as an officer in the prison service, and they had the date that the other fat bastard had been commissioned into the prison service, and I was senior by 4 years, and I passed the exam, so that was it. It failed. Malcolm de Kock was not very happy. But then again, he was an arsehole, so who gives one? When I was working at Strangeways, you know, I mean, I've been on TV, I've been in the papers, I've been on the radio. I did an interview with BBC Radio Manchester a few times, that, yeah. I did that, and I was becoming very well known, you know, in the prison system, obviously, not in generally in society. Although people had seen me on TV talking about the trade union and how we were going to get this done, and we were going to get it done. And the POA were absolutely fuming. And I was on duty one day as an hospital officer, yeah, and this guy came in. He was on training, you know. He'd only just joined the prison, you know, as an officer, and he came on to A1 landing, where I was in charge of A1 landing in the hospital. And I said to him, yeah, this is A1, I'll show you around what we do. The clinic's at the end. We deal with the hospital patients that are in the cells here. You know, there's probably about 10 of them, 15 of them, something like that. You know, and so I showed him round, discussed some of the cases with him briefly. And he said, I said, you've been very helpful. He said, what's your name? I said, it's John Sutton. You know, what? He said, I'm not allowed to speak to you. I said, hang on. I said, what do you mean you're not allowed to speak to me? He said, my wife told me I'm not to speak to you because you're trouble. Seriously, the soft bastard. Eh? You're going to speak to me, and he never spoke to me. Pissed off after that. Imagine that. Hey, and that's not all that happened. At Wormwood Scrubs, where I'd worked previously, they had a meeting of the Prison Officers Association and banned me from entering Wormwood Scrubs. I didn't know anything about it, but there were staff coming back from visits to the scrubs, you know, took inmates to the scrubs that had to be exchanged, you know, and they said, strange thing happened when we got there to the scrubs. They came on, 2 prison officers came on and searched the bus and they were looking for you because they said you're not allowed in. So I was banned from Wormwood Scrubs. Imagine that. At Liverpool Prison, this is not a joke, at Liverpool Prison, I was due to give a talk to the staff, and we'd hired a hall in Liverpool, and I was going to make a speech there and a big talk about why we needed an independent trade union. The reason you need an independent trade union, because if you don't have one, all you've got is a management. And that's what the POA was. It was a tool of the management, run by the management. At Liverpool Prison, they had a meeting, the governor, the chief officer, in fact all the chief officers, and the chairman of the Prison Officers Association, who was a principal officer, and they called all the staff to a meeting, and they said to them, there is to be a meeting this evening, spoken at by John Sutton. Anybody in this prison that attends that meeting will be dismissed from the POA. We will expel them from the POA, and Liverpool Prison is a closed shop. So if you're not in the Prison Officers Association, you will not be working at this prison. Well, you can imagine what the staff did. They bottled it, didn't they? I had the meeting. I had about 40 or 50 people lined up to come and speak, come and see me, They're all the junior staff were going to come because they knew that they were being screwed down not only by the management, but by their own union. That's right. The POA, a tool of the union, a tool of the management. Wasn't a trade union at all. Or bollocks. Anyway, I'm going to sing to you again. I mean, I know I've had some rave reviews here. People are saying, my cat jumped out the window as soon as it heard you. Somebody else said their potted plants ran out the room. And mind you, some people are saying that they like it, Seriously, if you like this singing, go and get some help. You might need it. Anyway, this is a song that I particularly like, and I am a big fan of Jack Daniels, and my favourite whiskey is, in actual fact, called Lafroig. I like Talisker as well. You can tempt me with that, but I like Lafroig. I also drink Johnny Walker as a general rule because it's cheap and cheerful, isn't it? Let's be honest, yeah. Don't drink in the pubs. I can't go in the pubs. I drink at home with my wife and friends. I've got some friends, Got a son-in-law. He comes and has a beer with me. I think he's psychic, my son-in-law. He always knows where the gin's hidden. Sometimes even I don't know where it's hidden. Because my wife hides it, you see. Yeah. Anyway, this is a song in tribute to my favourite tipple, and it's called Nancy Whiskey. Now, it talks about the Calton Weavers, yeah. That's an area where they did a lot of weaving near Edinburgh, I believe, yeah. So this is a song that I'm going to sing you now in my inimitable fashion. So hold on to your hats. I'm a weaver, a Calton weaver. I'm a rash and a roving blade. I've got silver in my pocket, and I follow the roving trade. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy, whiskey. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy, oh. I came in by Glasgow City. Nancy Whiskey, I chanced to smell. I went in, sat down beside her. 7 long years I loved her well. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy Whiskey. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy, oh. The more I kissed her, the more I loved her. The more I loved her, the more she smiled. I forgot my mother's teaching. Nancy soon had me beguiled. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy Whiskey. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy, oh. When I awoke in the morning to quench my thirst, it was my need. Tried to rise, but I was not able. Nancy Whiskey had me by the knees. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy Whiskey. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy, oh. Come on, landlady, what's me owing? Tell me what there is to pay. 15 shillings is my reckoning. Pay quickly and go away. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy Whiskey. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy, oh. Come on, you weavers, ye Calton weavers. Come all young men, where'er ye be. Beware of whiskey, Nancy Whiskey. She'll ruin you like she ruined me. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy Whiskey. Whiskey, whiskey, Nancy, oh. There you go. Make mine a large one. Woo! Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe. Yeah, like it or whatever you do. And thank you very much. I'll see you soon.